Because across this country, we are seeing a dangerous trend: industrial warehouses, buildings designed to store goods, being considered to be used as immigration detention facilities. And I'm here to clearly say, as well as my members of Indivisible, that human beings are not inventory. Warehouses are built for pallets, they're built for goods, they're not built for children, not built for families, and they're certainly not built for people that have faced trauma. And they are not built for justice. As an immigration lawyer, I represent asylum seekers. I represent people who fled persecution, violence, political repression. I represent mothers who've crossed the borders holding their children because they believe that America meant safety. Let me tell you about one of my clients. She was detained in a facility that was never meant to hold her long term. She slept under bright lights, never fully turned off. She struggled to receive medical care, never having access to see her children, her American-born children, hearings delayed, calls dropped, legal documents lost, and her due process rights not guaranteed, but they are guaranteed under the Constitution. When detention is placed in industrial zones, far from community oversight, far from legal services, far from public accountability, it does not just detain people, it isolates them. And isolation erodes justice. I'm wearing a shirt today with a bear draped with the American flag. To me, this bear represents resilience, it represents protection, what might seek, the promise that America stands for something bigger than fear. This flag is not a symbol of cages, it's a symbol of liberty, a symbol of due process, and it's a symbol of equal protection under the law. If we believe in this flag, then truly believe in it, then we cannot allow buildings meant for storage to become places of confinement for vulnerable human beings. This is not about one company, about one corporation. This is about corporate responsibility. Developers and property owners across the country are being asked, or may be asked, to sell or lease their industrial properties for these detention centers. And I ask those corporations, as well as members of Indivisible, and as a lawyer who sees the human cost every day, to not do so. You may say it's legal because legality is not the same as morality. You may say it's just business, but business decisions shape our community. And you may say it's not their responsibility. But when you choose how your property is used, you do make a moral choice. Warehouses lack the infrastructure necessary for humane long-term detention. They're not designed with adequate medical facilities. They're definitely not designed to hold children. And they are not designed to safeguard constitutional access to counsel. When you convert these industrial spaces into detention spaces, you create environments where due process becomes harder and oversight, which we've already seen with existing detention facilities, becomes weaker, and suffering becomes easier to ignore. And let me be clear about something. Detention is not a neutral act. Detention determines whether someone can meaningfully access their lawyer. It determines whether a child sleeps next to their parent. And detention determines whether someone who has suffered long-term trauma carries those scars moving forward. I have clients who have won their asylum cases in detention. Yes, they won them and they're free living here in the United States. Yet they carry scars from the months and years they've spent in detention. Scars that did not need to exist. Corporations have a choice and they can say, we will not participate in expanding these detention infrastructures. They can say our properties will not be used to warehouse human beings. And they can choose to stand over with community over confinement. Because when corporations refuse, it sends a message. Human dignity, it's not for sale. Industrial convenience will not override constitutional values. We can enforce laws without abandoning humanity. We can build communities without building cages, and corporations can still profit without participating in harm. So today, we ask developers, landlords, and corporate leaders everywhere, if you are approached with proposals to use your warehouses for immigration detention facilities, say no. Say no not because of politics, say no not because of principle, say no because the Constitution deserves infrastructure designed for justice, not storage, and say no because the flag represents liberty, and liberty does not belong in a warehouse. Thank you all for giving us this time and space.
Next, we're going to hear from Samantha Turner. She's with the North Carolina Poor People's Campaign.
Good morning. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming out today in this weather. I'm Samantha Turner. I'm representing the North Carolina Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Today we must speak plainly. Building ICE detention camps in our city, anywhere in this nation, is a moral failure. Building ICE detention, it is not about safety, it's not about order, it's not about justice. It's about criminalizing brown bodies. It's about profiting from cages. It is about expanding a system that has already torn families apart, traumatized children, and destabilized entire communities. Detention centers are not solutions. They are warehouses for human beings. We know what happens inside these facilities. Overcrowding, medical neglect, abuse, people denied due process, people denied for months, detained sometimes for years without conviction or any crime. We know the stories of mothers separated from their children, of workers disappeared from job sites, of our neighbors taken in unmarked vehicles by masked agents. And now they want to build more of it. More cages, more contracts, more concrete poured over the moral foundation of our communities. At a time when our schools are underfunded, when families cannot afford rent, when rural hospitals are closing, when working people cannot survive on poverty wages, when hurricane recovery remains incomplete, when mental health services are scarce, when affordable housing is out of reach, they tell us there is money for detention centers. This is a moral contradiction. If we have public dollars, they should go to housing, not building cells, to clinics, not cages, to living wages, not locked doors, to disaster recovery, not deportation infrastructure. The Poor People's Campaign teaches that policy is a reflection of moral priorities. So what does it say about us if we choose to expand detention camps instead of expanding healthcare? If we fund incarceration instead of education? If we build fear instead of belonging? We refuse to normalize the disappearance of our neighbors. We refuse to allow private corporations to profit off human suffering. We refuse to let North Carolina become a testing ground for mass detention. Real safety comes from stable housing, from good jobs, from strong schools, from health care, from commitments in communities where people know one another and care for one another. Real safety comes from investing in people, not imprisoning them. This is not just an immigration issue. This is a poverty issue. This is a racial justice issue. This is a democracy issue. This is a moral issue. And moral issues demand moral courage. We call on elected officials to reject these contracts. We call on faith leaders to speak out. We call on workers to refuse complicity. We call on communities to organize. Because history will ask us what we did when cages expanded. And we will be able to say, we stood up, we spoke out, we chose people over prisons, we chose dignity over detention, we chose justice over fear. That is the moral arc we are bending, and we will not stop until every person's humanity is recognized. Not as a slogan, but as public policy. Thank you.
Crescent Communities has had a proud legacy and claims to foster a culture of inclusion and belonging and taken the right path over the easy one. utilizing their properties intended for industrial use as human detention centers is in direct conflict with their company values. Our immigrant neighbors are the backbone of our community. They deserve dignity, safety, and basic humanity. They are undoubtedly a critical part of the success and profitable outcomes of this company, which is why we are calling on Crescent communities to take action with the following demands. Pledge not to allow your industrial warehouses to be sold or leased for human detention, and commit that you will not make any such future plans or agreements with DHS or ICE. Denounce the misappropriation of any industrial zone property use as inhumane, unsafe detention camps without the infrastructure or facilities to support it. And proactively work to protect the communities you champion from the damaging impact of detention facilities. Increase surveillance, enforcement, and a strain on roads, water systems, public resources, and emergency services. We understand that Crescent Communities has stated that it is not currently in communication with ICE or DHS for a proposed sale or lease. However, we respectfully ask that you continue to act as a responsible community partner and business leader by standing up for humane values and upholding your mission to build community, better people's lives. We simply request a clear, proactive public statement and pledge declining participation in detention-related property transactions, which would demonstrate alignment with your stated values and provide reassurance to the broader community. Thank you. Sure.
Crescent has said that they have no interest in this facility currently. They also mentioned that the zoning is being there for it to be built on their site. They simply said they showed up on a leasing form or a list of vacant properties. So if there is a document that shows they were vacant, they were interested in renting with DHS, why protest them if they don't have any intention of doing anything?
We are simply requesting that they issue, if their plan and their intent is not to sell or lease their property for that use, then we're simply asking for a public statement that says that.
And it's not just about Crescent communities. This is across not just Charlotte or the Concord communities, just not North Carolina, but across the United States. We know they showed up on a list because the Department of Homeland Security is interested in those properties. And we want those corporations to stand along with the communities and hear our voice. And this is a venue that we can have our voice heard and show that, great, you're saying via statement that your property is not being considered at this time. You are not in formal talks. That's wonderful. Can you make a public reassurance to this community that in the future, if the Department of Homeland Security seeks to lease or purchase this property, that you would not move forward with that? And it's not just about Crescent communities, this is about all corporations. Escogimos este lugar porque Crescent Communities es una corporación que apareció, lo que indica el New York Times, en una lista de que el Departamento de Seguridad está considerando una propiedad que ellos tienen, una propiedad, una bodega industrial. Y nosotros estamos aquí para ser la voz que no es un centro apropiado, los humanos no deben de estar puestos en bodegas industriales y no es necesariamente para Crescent Communities, es para las comunidades en todos los Estados Unidos, no solamente Carolina del Norte, que queramos alzar la voz que estos tipos de detenciones no son justos, no son humanos y que quisiéramos que estas corporaciones digan públicamente que si en el futuro desea el Departamento de Seguridad Nacional llegar a un acuerdo para usar esos centros industriales como centros de detención, que ellos no firmarían esos acuerdos. Okay, I just want you to know. She's just so quiero decirle para que ellos entiendan. She's just asking, have we received information from present communities? So I'll tell her in Spanish that we have and why we're here. Okay. So si hemos recibido notificación de parte de ellos a través de un correo electrónico informando que no están en discusiones para acuerdos para comprar la propiedad ni llegar a un acuerdo a rentar la propiedad. Pero todavía nosotros le estamos sugiriendo a ellos, pidiéndole a ellos que nos den una aclaración pública, que si en el futuro el Departamento de Seguridad Nacional quisiera llegar a un acuerdo, que ellos van a decir no. Y eso no es solamente para esta corporación, que sí ha dicho que no están en acuerdos ahora mismo, pero todas las corporaciones, no solamente aquí en Carolina del Norte, pero todos los Estados Unidos, que nuestra comunidad, que el público no quiere que lleguen a estos tipos de acuerdos, porque estas bodegas industriales no son áreas en que humanos deben de estar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.